welcome. It's Lumpy with Fool's Paradise Fishing, and today we're going to talk about snagging sockeye. And you can do this on any of the freshwater rivers. The setup I have today applies to all rivers except for the Russian. The Russian requires a specific hook that has a 1/8 or 3/8 inch gap. It's in the regs, and so although the setup's similar, it just requires a different hook. What is on this is a 2/0 hook. This is good for the Kenai. This is good for the Russian there in Seward. This is good for the Sealoft, Anchor, all these other rivers in the area. I just know the Kenai area, so I can't speak to any other, the Matanuska or any of those rivers like that. So what you're going to have is a 7/8-9 fly rod. That's what I recommend, and I'll tell you the reasons here in a minute. You want to reel with a drag, and then the fly line doesn't matter. Weight forward would be preferred, but what we'll have here is about 6-7 feet of mono, 15-pound mono. Got a 2/0 hook, and it goes down to a 3-way, if I can get it untangled. But it goes down to a 3-way with a 1/8 ounce weight. And the reason you want the teardrop weight is it glides over the rocks and doesn't snag. And what I will tell you about the 2/0 hooks is you go through them, so buy the cheapest one you can. And that way you can just change them out. And that's one of the reasons why the long, it's just 15-pound mono, 15 to 20 is the norm. I use 20-pound pink Andy. Just because it kind of matches some of the colors. But you want a bit of a drag so that you get some resistance to the fish. Otherwise, you're really messing with the reel. Fighting butt, because you can stick it right there and fight, and you want to kind of turn it in a position that will allow you to use the bend of the pole to pull the fish in. And I tend to, after I hook a fish, walk upstream. They're swimming that way anyway. I walk upstream if I can and pull them in. Sometimes there's people right there. A lot of times I go places where there's nobody at, so I can easily walk upstream. And again, 7/8-9, because the fish, sockeye will be about 5 to 10 pounds, and they could put the hurt on if you have something smaller. And even if you go up there for trout, I would get a 7/8-9 because the trout are big up there. They're as big as sockeye. So. And not people fish for them, but not the tourists. I mean, they're there all the time, especially in the Russian and the Kenai. And so what I'm wearing is the waders. I tend to wear waders because I'm in the water a lot. I did say not to buy Sims and stuff, but yeah, I got a set of Sims. It's for what I use. I also have a set of Redington. I kind of go back and forth because you got to clean, you get blood and stuff on them. You won't get this nice of a setup from the Seward Military Resort. You'll get some waders with rubber boots. I have regular boots with my waders that you got to buy separately. It's just the caddis ones, and just buy cheap. Most of the time I get stuff on garage sales. My wife found the $400 Redingtons at a garage sale for 75 bucks, so we immediately bought those. And they're pretty heavy duty. This is not as heavy duty as a Redington, so I tend to wear the Redington more. And that's kind of how I do it up there. So what we'll do is go on down to the river and we'll set up, and then I'll kind of demonstrate how to cast for it. You really want a light setup, because the first time I did this way back when, I was using a regular spinning rod that was kind of heavy. It was a 9-footer. You want to kind of have a 9-footer. But then, because you do it over and over and over, especially if you're not catching, that resulted in me getting tendonitis in the elbow and bursitis in the shoulder and arthritis in the hands. So lighter is better in this case. All right, we'll talk more down by the river. All right, we're down here by the river. We're on the river, actually. And what you want to do is get your line out a little bit farther. And then make sure you got it out. And you want to flip it out. So what we're going to do is flip it across the river, and you're pulling it because the fish are coming up this way and the river's going that way. And then you, again, flip it out And then once it's perpendicular or perpendicular to the flow of the river, you pull it through and you want to catch it in their mouths. The line's going to go down into their mouth, you pull through, and that'll hook it. And you'll know when you got one. The fish will let you know. And what you're looking for is slow places to fish. And so you end up looking downriver because you want to see the fish coming up. And if there's people fishing down the river, then you'll see them catching, and that way you know a surge is coming up. Because you'll see people down the river hooking in the fish, and you know a bunch of fish are coming up, because most of the time the fish come up in small schools and they don't sit there and come up individually. And especially there's a couple of days in the summer in July when 100,000 fish come up the river, and so that's a lot of fish. And so you'll see the surge coming up, and you'll see people hooking into them. So you know to get ready. You want to have your polarized sunglasses so you can see in the water and you can see them coming, and that way you can try and floss it right through their mouths and get a good hook. Most of the time with this setup, I get it right into the corner of their mouth, and they almost never get away. And so if they hook in initially, they're pretty much in. When you do the Russian River hooks with that 3/8 inch gap, that tends to, sometimes they'll spit the hook just because it's such a small gap, and the hook shank is really long, but the hook is not. And then you also don't want to really hork on them. I've seen people throw the rod over their shoulders, and then they tend to try and just drag them onto the beach. I tend to walk up the river with them and pull them closer to shore. They're swimming in that direction anyway, so you might as well let them do the work and bring them in. But this is how it goes. You tend to do this over and over. And if the fish are really running, where there's it's 100,000 sockeye day up the Kenai or the Resurrection or the Russian doesn't get that 100,000, but they'll get 10,000. And this river is twice as big as the Russian River. It is not nearly as wide. The Russian River is not this wide. So, and then the Kasilof, I won't tell you where I'm at, but the Kasilof is about this big, and but they tend to all swim on one side of the river or the other, and it just depends on what day it is. But this is what you do. You just do this over and over, and you're looking downstream, waiting for someone to catch a fish, so you know they're coming, unless you're the only one out here. But and then you pull them up on the shore here, use the fish whacker, knock them out, get your little stringer, throw it on, and depending on what it is, you get 3, 6, 9, or 12. I've never seen 15, but I've seen 12. So you'll get those. And you want to get skinny water, is what they say, shallow water, so that the hook has a better presentation to grab into the fish. And we'll talk about when I fish the Russian, I'll put we'll put a pink yarn on it in the early part, and then I'll put orange yarn in the later part, because the sockeye and the coho will bite at it because they think it's eggs. So they'll bite at the eggs. Now this is a little bit faster than normally. You kind of do this and then come across. You want to put a little bit of bend into the rod, and I'll back up and give a better presentation of that. So you do want to put a little bend in the rod. If you watch the rod, you see there's a bend. And what that does, let it sink down, bend, and that'll set the hook, because if it hits a fish, it's going to punch the hook through the skin or gill plate. And remember, in Alaska, unless they change the rules on me when I'm not watching, is that anything on the head. And that's why you see people do this, and when they get the presentation where they pull on it, because they want to put some a bend in the rod, so that when it does hit the fish, the hook goes into its mouth. So this is how it works, and then this is how you will floss for sockeye and in the Kenai area. And if you go over to Kodiak, you can do the same thing, although I tend to just fly fish for them, but for the coho that are over there. And the coho over in Kodiak are big. They're bigger than normal coho. They get pretty big. So that's why a lot of people go and do the road fishing over in Kodiak. And then the sockeye, they tend to vary depending on which river you go, because they're going up to a lake, and so they're all wild. So you get certain strains that some tend to be bigger, some smaller. It just depends on the river, and it varies from year to year. It just depends on how much food is out in the ocean, things like that. But they all fight. That's the one thing they all do. So that's why you need to get a 2-piece or a 4-piece if you're not going to catch that many. Like when I'm up there fishing for like 50 days in a row, then I'm using a Reddington Behemoth on a Okuma Kenai Special rod, which you can only buy at Soldotna Hardware there in Kenai. It's a 2-piece, pretty rugged, for lack of a better phrase. So this is how the basics of flossing for sockeye and coho, maybe, in the freshwater rivers of Alaska. So this is Lumpy with Fool's Paradise Fishing, and we'll have some more content later. Thanks.